What's up guys, and you're here to learn about the new iPad Pro 9.7. In this video, I'm going to be showing you everything that's new about it. I want to give you a good idea about whether this iPad is worth the money, what's really changed since the last version, and just give you a good idea of what the new iPad Pro 9.7 inch is. Apple seems to think that this new iPad is now able to take on the PC industry. Let's put that to the test, and personally, no Apple, no, this thing will not ever battle with a PC. It's running a mobile operating system slightly optimized for a larger display. Now, aside from that, this thing is in its own right a tablet, and as a tablet, it does a damn good job. Instead of focusing on MacBooks, Apple's put their effort where it matters, iPads. So now the display is less reflective, 40% less reflective, there's a wider color gamut, and in general, the display is widely improved, both in terms of contrast ratio, colors, reflectivity, and even viewing angles. It's definitely apparent. So looking at some pictures side by side, the colors are indeed juicier. I can definitely see how there is an improvement on the left with the new iPad Pro 9.7. And oh man, can I just say how bad the naming has gotten for iPads? We've gone from iPad 1, 2, 3 to iPad Air, iPad Air 2, now to iPad Pro 9.7. I mean, it's just a cluster. So the star of the show is True Tone Display. Now this thing, calibrates your display according to your environment. So no matter where you are, you're going to have a picture perfect display. Just like a sheet of paper that reflects light based on your ambience, the display now uses two new sensors to reflect your current environment. And I can say it definitely works. It's a better fine-tuned version of Night Shift. And I just want to take a moment to say one thing. The fact that Apple is still innovating with their iPad lineup is really impressive to me. This True Tone display, this thing hasn't been seen anywhere else, and we'll likely see it in future iPhones. In general, iPads have reached a bottleneck, and a lot of people just don't upgrade anymore because why upgrade? There's no real reason. Most people use their iPads for media, for things that don't generally require an upgrade often. And getting to materials, Apple didn't see a reason to really upgrade them here. If you're worried about durability, don't be. Most people don't often drop their iPads, but if you do, they will sustain a good amount of shock, as I've proven in some of my videos. Actual materials are aluminum 7000 and single ion technology glass. And something I was surprised about was that the new iPad Pro 9.7 adopted the Apple Pencil. Early rumors actually said that this was unlikely to happen to differentiate the iPad lineup. I'm very happy that Apple decided to adopt it with this version of the iPad. Having an Apple Pencil on a smaller display is actually very comfortable. It's closer to a sheet of paper, and I find it less of a commitment to, grab the 9.7 iPad instead of the larger 12.7 inch. I'm not much of an artist, as you guys can see, but in every way, the Apple Pencil is just like the one on the larger iPad Pro. No watering down here. It's an amazing drawing tool. So, the iPad Pro 9.7, iPad Air 2, and iPad Pro. The lineup is starting to get a little fragmented here, but Apple decided to take a lot of the features from the larger iPad Pro and adopt them in this version, including the smart connector, which allows you to use that new smart keyboard. There's a smaller version of it, which makes it somewhat of a hybrid between a laptop and an iPad. I probably wouldn't recommend the iPad Pro 9.7 without this smart keyboard. If you're looking to use the Pro side of the iPad, this is definitely recommended. It allows you to use a lot of keyboard shortcuts, and in general, using the iPad with it is so much easier. The software, of course, is just like that of the iPad Air 2. You have the new picture-in-picture split screen view. Apple really wants this thing to compete with a laptop and eventually replace it. They're making strides toward it with iOS 9.3. They really made a lot of improvements there, but I just cannot see this thing ever replacing my laptop. Not to mention the software can be so buggy at times. It's really frustrating trying to use this thing as a pro machine. And honestly, if Apple really thought it was a pro machine, why don't they create pro software for it? Final Cut, something that really takes advantage of the size of the processing power instead of just using regular App Store applications and adding more power to this thing saying it's a pro device. So I'm not trying to rag on it. I'm just thinking Apple could definitely do a lot more to bring out the pro side. Power-wise, it's certainly there. This uses the A9X, slightly underclocked, but then again, this thing does have less pixels to push. Gaming performance really is great. I gotta say, on a smaller display, it's a lot easier to hold the iPad and game with it. Now, it does have less RAM, 2 gigabytes versus 4 gigabytes of the larger iPad Pro, but the difference you really won't notice that much. I've always been impressed with Apple and the ability to get so much power from such low specs on paper. They're really good with that. In fact, Apple is even starting to approach some low-end Intel chips with their own, architecture, and I think that's incredible. So if you're buying this thing to play games, it's definitely a mean machine when it comes to gaming. I just wish there were better crafted titles for it. Now, the camera on the iPad Pro 9.7 is one of its strongest features, and why shouldn't it be? It's the fully fledged iPhone 6s 12 megapixel sensor in the iPad frame. Now, as a result, the camera does protrude a little bit. Fortunately, the iPad is still stable on a table. It doesn't rock back and forth, so you don't have to worry about that. It's a little ugly. This camera completely replaces an iPhone 6s as a shooter. If you like to take photos, videos with your iPad, this is such a good tool to do it with. I mean, it's the fully fledged sensor, 4K video, slow motion, really good low light, and in my eyes the only missing feature is optical image stabilization. This thing is large, it's heavy, it's hard to hold, so I see myself swaying, shaking more using the iPad to film videos. So definitely one thing the next iPad should bring. Photo quality is good. Of course, you can take live photos, and there is a dedicated flash unit on the back, the very first for this iPad. I'm very glad Apple went all out on the camera, and it's definitely apparent. Quality is good. Color vibrance is true to life, but not as good, of course, as Samsung's offerings. So one of the strongest suits of this iPad is, of course, the new 4-speaker setup. It is absolutely incredible, and I love how loud it is. Like, it blew my mind first listening to it, just how loud it was. And it's not just that it's loud, it's booming. There's actual bass and sound to it. It could replace a portable speaker even. So that's the speaker. Battery life is all day, about 10 hours of usage varied from Safari and just general usage. But as a result, this thing does actually heat up. It has a larger battery, it's more powerful, so this thing is on average about 90 degrees. My iPhone's usually about 86, 85, so this thing can get warm. Wireless is advanced LTE, so it has more LTE bands than the larger iPad. It does have new Hey Siri untethered, and it does have front-facing flash. So a lot of goodies in here, and even extras like live photos that aren't really needed, but they're nice to have. Apple did skimp on the fingerprint sensor using old technology, and it did skimp on the actual USB port. So you don't get fast charging just like on the larger iPad Pro. This is only USB 2.0. Materials, again, are still the lower end materials. They haven't been upgraded yet. All this for a starting price of $599 at 32 gigabytes. At least it's not 16. It jumps to $749 for 128. And lastly, finally, a new offering at 256 gigabytes $900. Now that begs the question, is this thing worth the money? That price doesn't even count the Smart Keyboard or Apple Pencil, which is about $200 more. For a comparable amount of money, you can get a fully fledged Windows laptop that'll run an actual OS. Whether this thing is worth the money or not, that's up to you really, but to me, I just couldn't see this thing ever replacing a laptop. Don't buy one with that in mind. It's a good tablet. It's one of the best. It has a best display. It's incredibly fast. It has amazing speakers and amazing camera. The Apple Pencil support is incredible, but just don't expect this thing to work miracles and replace a laptop for you. Just want to thank you guys for stopping by and watching this review. It wasn't easy to make. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Hope you make the right choice. Peace.